The story begins with Chris, a wealthy man who is shown exercising against a backdrop of snowy mountains. He lives in a cool highland area. Afterward, he is seen discussing the process of his divorce and child support with his wife, Jamie. Chris clearly regrets that their marriage is ending, as shown by his reluctance to sign the divorce papers. He spends most of his time focusing on his business affairs, while Jamie feels lonely and has firmly decided that she wants to move on and live independently. That evening, Chris goes to the supermarket, where he notices a young woman named Sky wearing soaked clothes after rushing in from the rain. She asks him for a recommendation on a wine that can help her relax, mentioning that she has had a rough day. Chris happily suggests a Nebbiolo. They introduce themselves, and after they finish shopping, Chris sees Sky becoming frustrated when her rideshare driver cancels on her. Feeling concerned, he offers to drive her himself. She agrees, and he takes her to the motel where she says she is staying. Once in front of the motel, Sky mentions having issues with her friend Lisa, and she seems hesitant to go inside. Chris, not wanting to leave her alone in such distress, offers her a place to stay at his house for the night. Sky turns around and accepts the invitation. It is not immediately clear if Sky has a hidden motive, or if she simply needs help. When they arrive at Chris's home, Sky is visibly impressed by the luxurious house. They chat over wine, and Chris reveals that he owns a company specializing in home security systems. Sky talks about her past as a fashion magazine model in Los Angeles, and how she ended that career to work as a server in a bar. Chris also shows her his wine collection, kept in his home storage space. Sky grows fascinated by Chris, and their pleasant conversation lasts late into the night. At one point, Sky contemplates asking Chris to drop her back at the motel, but Chris is already interested in her and persuades her to stay. Eventually, they spend an intimate night together. The next morning, Sky departs from Chris's home without saying goodbye. Chris feels some regret about the previous evening, given that he is still married to Jamie. When Sky arrives at the motel, she quarrels with Lisa, who is upset that Sky did not inform her that she would be out all night. From their conversation, it becomes clear that Sky has essentially been staying with Lisa without any real plan, acting in a carefree manner. Later that night, Chris decides to seek Sky out at the bar where she works. Initially motivated by guilt, he now seems drawn to her and wants to see her again. The two engage in another warm conversation, which quickly turns into a date. During this meeting, Sky opens up about her background, sharing that she has never had a family and was moved between different foster homes while growing up. Chris then discloses some of his own past. He was often left alone by his parents, an experience that led to his deep concern for home security. While Chris is walking Sky out, a young man attempts to break into Chris's car window. This individual makes an offensive remark toward Sky, suggesting that he plans to harm Chris and then pursue Sky. Infuriated, Sky throws a bottle at him, but it misses. The man then strikes Chris's leg with the metal bar he had been using to pry the car window. Chris ends up with a severe injury. Realizing that Chris was trying to protect her, Sky feels indebted to him and offers to help him recover until he can walk again. Chris, feeling lonely and increasingly attached to Sky, accepts her offer, seeing her almost as a replacement for the companionship he no longer shares with Jamie. Chris tells Sky to gather her belongings from the motel and move in with him. She asks him for his home security code, in case he is asleep when she returns. Meanwhile, back at the motel, Ronald, who owns the place, approaches Lisa, who is anxiously waiting for Sky to come back. Ronald remarks that Lisa is not as content as she used to be before Sky moved in with her. He also teasingly hands Lisa a flower, implying he is fond of her. At that moment, Sky arrives, and Ronald, in a stern manner, demands that she pay the motel fees she owes, which are long overdue. From Lisa's overly anxious concern about Sky spending the night at Chris's house, it becomes apparent that Lisa's feelings for Sky may go beyond simple friendship. Back at Chris's residence, Sky returns and wakes him from his sleep on the couch. Chris's leg injury does not prevent them from growing closer, and once again they share a moment of intimacy. Over the following days, Sky diligently tends to Chris's injured leg, and Chris in turn becomes increasingly captivated by Sky's presence, almost forgetting that he still has responsibilities to his former family. The next day, Ronald comes to Lisa's motel room to ask her about the unpaid rent. After knocking a few times with no response, He uses a spare key to enter. Inside the bathroom, he is horrified to find Lisa covered in blood, with deep cuts on both her hands. Ronald immediately calls the police. Elsewhere at Chris's house, Sky casually picks up Chris's phone, unlocking it using his face while he is still drowsy. Chris quickly falls back asleep, unaware of what Sky is doing. Meanwhile, at the motel crime scene, the police interview Ronald, who is shocked to learn that the ID Sky used for registration does not show up in any official records. In other words, the name Sky is not registered anywhere. This suggests it is a false identity. Later that day, Chris receives a video call from Jamie. Unlike their usual calls, Chris seems distant, even when Jamie brings up their daughter, Willow. Jamie asks about the divorce paperwork, but Chris explains he cannot finalize it due to the recent injury to his leg. Concerned, Jamie offers to bring Willow for a visit that coming Friday. Chris also mentions that he has hired a private caregiver to help him, and Jamie expresses surprise at his decision, pointing out that it is uncharacteristic of Chris to let a stranger stay in his home, given his usual priority on personal security. After the call, Chris looks for Sky and realizes she is taking a shower. He notices her bag and is intrigued by a photograph inside it, one of Sky and Lisa posing together. He accidentally drops one of Sky's possessions, making a noise that alerts her. Sky catches him looking through her things, but, surprisingly, is not upset. She remarks that she understands if Chris is curious about her, and they move past the incident without conflict. Once again, they spend the night together. The following morning, Chris wakes up and discovers that his phone, which he normally keeps on the bedside table, is missing. While searching, he stumbles upon breaking news about Lisa's death. The media reports the cause of Lisa's demise is still unclear, whether it was suicide or homicide, because the police are looking into the whereabouts of Lisa's roommate, Sky. Moments later, Sky returns with some food. She calmly eats fried chicken, showing no apparent concern about the news of Lisa's death. Chris is stunned when Sky admits she was the one who ended Lisa's life, explaining that Lisa was jealous and interfered too much in her personal affairs. Even more shocking is Sky's confession that for the past 2 months, she had purposely stayed at Lisa's motel to observe Chris and devise a plan that included their chance meeting at the supermarket. All of it was carefully orchestrated. Even Chris's injury was part of the scheme, carried out with assistance from others. Chris becomes furious and demands that Sky leave his house immediately. However, because Sky now controls the home's security system, Chris cannot simply escape. Before long, Sky uses a stun gun to render him unconscious. Chris awakens to find himself tied to a wheelchair. Sky, now in a threatening mood, sets her demands. Chris must transfer all his funds into her account. Naturally, Chris resists, shouting at Sky and insulting her. She responds by forcefully knocking him over in the wheelchair. She also uses a drill on Chris's already injured leg, causing him such pain that he eventually surrenders the password to his banking information. Meanwhile, Ronald begins cleaning out the motel room and finds a telescope set up, aimed directly at Chris's house. He sees Sky moving around inside Chris's home. The next day, Sky insists that Chris participate in a video call from the bunker-like basement to liquidate his shares and announce the formation of her new venture, Sky.co. So Chris will need to appear presentable. He cannot look like a prisoner bound to a chair. She cuts the strap securing his arms. The moment he is free, Chris lunges to choke Sky and a fight ensues. Sky, still holding the scissors, stabs Chris in the arm. On top of that, she threatens Chris by mentioning Willow and Jamie, vowing to harm them if Chris does not cooperate. Alarmed, Chris begs her not to hurt his family and agrees to her demands. Sky then removes all the phone lines to prevent Chris from reaching anyone outside. The following day, Sky brazenly sells all of Chris's possessions, his artwork, furniture, and valuable wine collection, to an associate named Kiju. Kiju is the same individual who confronted Chris earlier outside the bar, injuring his knee. Later, Sky drives Chris's car for another errand to finalize the sales. At the same time, Ronald breaks into Chris's house by smashing a window. Since the security system is linked to Chris's phone, which Sky currently has, an alert prompts Sky to hurry back. Inside, Ronald attempts to make a deal with Chris. He will call the police if Chris gives him one of his Picasso paintings. Chris readily agrees, desperate for rescue. Yet Ronald has no phone, stating he does not use one at all. Sky arrives soon after, leaving Ronald no time to flee. Panicked, Ronald grabs a kitchen knife to defend himself, but Sky wields a sword. Distracted by Sky, Ronald is outmatched, and Chris seizes the moment to escape through the broken window. Limping severely, he finds a snowmobile and tries to flee on it. However, he falls off when he hits a rock on the paved road, made worse by his injured leg. At that moment, a passing driver stops and offers him assistance, and Chris urgently asks to call the police. He describes his situation to the person on the line, only to realize, to his horror, that the female officer speaking is actually Sky. The driver also turns out to be someone working with her. Chris is taken back to his house and meets Sky, who is covered in blood. She has killed Ronald. The driver is revealed to be Sky's father figure, Sebastian, who taught Sky how to assume false identities and trained her to be a skillful con artist. Together, they engineered this plan to trap Chris, a lonely millionaire. Sky made herself appear supportive and loving, presenting Chris with the affection he was missing at the time. That evening, Chris tells Sky that she did not need to resort to coercion to get his resources, since he had genuinely fallen for her. Sky, however, believes he is deceiving her. From her perspective, Chris would never willingly give her the $14 million kept securely in an American bank. That is precisely why Sky refused to act hastily. She needed Chris's fingerprint for the bank's security authorization. Rather than bringing Chris directly to the bank, which might raise suspicions about Sky and Sebastian, they devise a cruel alternative, cutting off Chris's thumb for biometric access to his safe deposit box. Friday arrives, the day Jamie had arranged to bring Willow to see Chris. Jamie is shocked to find the house in shambles, with bloodstains everywhere. Meanwhile, Sky and Sebastian have gone to the bank to withdraw the funds using Chris's severed thumb, attached to Sebastian's hand and hidden by a fake medical cast. While they are gone, Chris devises an escape plan. He directs Willow to crawl through the home's air duct system until she can reach the terrace and enter a security code. He explains the situation to Jamie, clarifying that Sky's true motive is to seize his holdings and that they plan to use his thumb to do so. Jamie then reveals that Chris's valuable bonds and funds are, in fact, not kept in the bank, which means Sky and Sebastian will come back empty-handed, and likely very soon. Chris and Jamie worry about Willow possibly encountering Sky and Sebastian as they return. Shortly after, Sebastian steps through the door, only to be ambushed by Chris wielding an axe. Chris manages to injure Sebastian, but Sebastian in turn strikes Chris. Sky arrives and aims a firearm at Chris. Sebastian urges her to seize Chris, noticing her momentary hesitation in pulling the trigger. It seems Sky might feel a flicker of genuine emotion for Chris, causing Sebastian to lose patience. He grows irate, uses harsh language toward her, and in response, Sky fires the gun at Sebastian, ending his life. Chris immediately takes advantage of the confusion, grabbing the phone that Sky dropped. He leverages his own expertise in the house's security technology he personally created, by cranking the music to disorient Sky, cutting the power, and activating the thermal night vision system that he designed for low-light situations. His goal is to disorient Sky before finally confronting her. In the darkness, Chris attacks her from behind, but Sky is still holding the axe and manages to strike back. Jamie tries to help Chris, but she is not strong enough to overpower Sky and ends up getting hurt. Determined to escape, Sky prepares to make one last attempt to eliminate both Chris and Jamie, but she forgets her gun lying on the floor. Willow, who has picked it up, fires the weapon at Sky. Wounded and near collapse, Sky admits before taking her last breath that her real name is Margaret. Moments later, the police arrive to rescue Chris and his family, concluding the ordeal. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.